Hello and welcome to Share. Well, mental illness is more common than most people realize. Handling that illness is very difficult for the individual, but it's also challenging for loved ones like close friends and family members. What can we do to help our loved ones handle their mental illness? How do we start the dialogue of conversation that ensures a healthy mental state for all that are affected by the illness? That's what we're discussing right here on Share. Well, in studio, we have psychologist Tebogo Monyamane and Megan Doty, a support group leader who's also battled with depression. A very warm welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. I would just like to start with you, Megan, and just to start this conversation of where do you talk about, because I was saying to you before the interview started that if most of us have gone through depression, but where does it become a huge challenge where it is an illness that needs to be dealt with and it's different from just everyday living where you do have your ups and downs?
Yeah, if I think about myself, who also suffered with depression, when it's not just a blue day, when every day is a blue day, and if it's not only one day, when it becomes 2 weeks at a time and 3 weeks at a time, when you realize yourself that it's not just one day that you just feel down, it's more than that. When you really need to go to your doctor and say there seems to be a problem, you don't feel well, you need to address this problem, when you need to go and see a psychologist and start doing something about it, because I have 2 young children and I need to be able to look after myself, to be there for them, because if I'm not well, then my kids can't be well. So I needed to take a stand and become well, and so that I can look after my kids.
Tebogo, I want to bring you in here. So what do you think would trigger that? Because I would imagine that it might be like a life incident that happens that causes a depression, or it could be an imbalance, but what mainly would cause that kind of state where it's not just, you know, like Megan is saying, it's not just one blue day, it just becomes every single day. It just seems impossible to go through.
Yeah, I think there are a number of different reasons why that would happen, and it differs from person to person, but I think generally speaking, it could be a life event, something that has happened that you're struggling to deal with, something that is continually happening, that is a challenge or a major stressor in your life, for which you're not having any resolution, and it also tends to run in families as well. So if, for example, there are people in your family who have depression or another mental illness, you're just more likely, should something happen in your life, you're just more likely, it's more likely that you might get something like depression. So it differs from person to person.
Megan, what was it for you?
Well, I just got divorced a year before. My son started school and he was really battling in school. So I had to start exploring to see what the problem was. So it was weekly visits to his teachers, weekly visits to, or monthly visits to the principal to see where I can help him, where the school can intervene and help him. And then eventually we had to get school psychologists involved, and he was eventually diagnosed with ADHD, and eventually we had to move him into a special needs school. So that also affected depression. So it was quite difficult to make sure that I am stable, and I saw a psychologist and I had to start taking antidepressants because I needed to make sure that everything in the house needs to be stable for my kids.
And I'm listening to your story, Megan, and I think I'm getting really emotional because I remember when you talked about your kids, that struck such a chord with me because I remember being in that situation of going through such a deep depression and had been through it before and thought, you know what, I'm going to be fine. And I think the day for me, I'd always said at the back of my mind, I will seek help when I can't. At that time, it was just my son, when I can't look after my son anymore. And that day happened for me. And so I think that's why I'm so emotional, because I remember that, of just my son coming towards me and not being able to pick him up. And he wasn't even a year old yet, so it wasn't even the weight, just not having anything in me to pick this child up and just thinking, this is rock bottom for me. I do need to get help now. So just speak to us, Tebogo, about you've gotten to the place that I've just described for myself that Megan was going through, and you're feeling overwhelmed. What do you do then?
And I think that's such an important point to raise, that often people wait till the very last minute when it's gotten to that point where they've reached rock bottom, as you say, and it's like, what do I do now? I think the thing to do is to go to your psychologist, or if you don't know where to start, you can even pick up the phone and call SADAG, and they'll know where to direct you. You can even go to your local clinic. You can go to, if you're in school, you can go to a teacher. If you have support at home, you can talk to your parents. You can say, this is how I'm feeling. I think I need help. Because I think that initial step is really very difficult for a lot of people, to get to a place where they can voice to another person that I think I need help.
And you're now on the other side of this, Megan, where people are phoning you and you're counseling them through similar situations that you went through, or maybe not anything related, but you know the feeling, because what was causing my depression wasn't going through a divorce, it was other things. But I mean, when you describe what you were feeling, that's exactly how I felt. So just speak about what you say to them when they do make that phone call, because I had spoken to my husband about how I was feeling, maybe not in depth, but what really changed it for me was when I spoke to a professional. That's when I really started to get the help that I need. So what is one of the first things that you would say to them? Somebody phones you at SADAG and they say, this is how I'm feeling, Megan.
You know, that they are safe, that they are welcome to talk to me, that that was the right a step in the right direction. Look, I'm not a professional psychologist, but you know, whatever they're going through is not the same, and we as people are obviously completely different, but at the end of the day, the feelings are all the same. So exactly like what you...
Don't you find though, Megan, that when they do phone you, like I was saying, just the relating of, that's how I felt, that you, even though you might not be a psychologist, but you've been through that feeling, you know how they're feeling despite what their situation is.
Yeah, and they also know that we don't judge them. They can talk to me about anything and they will not be judged. And the reason why I started the support group was when my son needed the help, I could always pick up the phone and there would always be someone at the other end to give me advice. So my son is doing well. He had awesome teachers at the special needs school. And I know I gave them a hard time because I didn't know what to expect. So I could always phone. So I thought, this is a way that I can give back to the community. So when someone phoned me and say, I got your number from SADAG and you run a support group, so I would always try and be there for someone else. If they phone me, I don't know the people that will come to the group, but they know that they will not be judged. They're welcome to come to the support group because the group is there every Thursday evening from 7 to 9. And I know what they're going through. It's not the same what I went through is always different. If someone went through a divorce with different people, so I can't say, I know how you feel, because I don't know. We're different people, but the feelings are always the same.
Teboho, I want to bring you in here when she talks about that judgment. I think it's very real because I don't know if it's because of society we live in where you always want to seem as though you're together and no matter what's happening, you can deal with it. So talk about that and how real that fear of judgment and maybe the shame comes into it, that people sometimes might not seek help, thinking that what are other people going to think of me if they know that I'm battling with depression.
Yeah, it's so true that fear of judgment, that stigma, it's still there with depression and all kinds of mental illnesses, is that people are afraid of being judged. They're afraid that if people know that I'm coming to see a psychologist, does that mean I'm crazy? I mean, people use that word, does that mean I'm crazy? And I think the most important thing that to do in cases like that, it's just that to explain to people that what they're experiencing is normal. Normal in the sense that they're not alone. Normal in the sense that there are other people who experience similar things, and that actually coming and seeking the help and getting help is a position of strength, because people think that I'm coming to you, it's a sign of weakness. Actually, it isn't. It's a sign of strength to say, all right, I'm doing something about this. So,
okay, we're going to be continuing with this conversation, ladies. Well, how do we remain tactful when trying to talk about something as sensitive as one's mental health? Often we may not know what to say or even how to say it. When we come back, we'll be talking about communication. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, there's a famous phrase that says, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Most of us need a little help when it comes to starting the conversation about mental health. What's the first thing we need to know about appropriate communication, and how do we know what to say or when to say it? And I think that's the big thing, hey, ladies, of like, what do you say? How do you say it? You see that your friend might be battling, and I'm sure, I'm going to ask this to you, Teboho. I'm sure the people around Megan should have seen she's not in a good place. She's not the Megan we used to know. She's doing things differently. She might be in this depression of, and I'm now making it general. You see that's happening. What do you say and how do you say it?
Yeah, I think the approach is very important because, like you say, it's not what you say, but how you say it. And I think as long as you're approaching someone with supportive, caring, in a supportive and caring manner. So to say, you know, I've noticed that you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay? I've noticed that you, if it's a friend, for example, that I don't see you as often, or you're being a little more irritable than usual. I wonder if everything's okay. And you just kind of leave it to them to open up to you and tell you what's going on. And it might happen that the person is not ready to admit that there's something that's going on. But I think a bit of patience and a bit of supportive, having a supportive nature can also help with that. So you maybe broach the subject, and then if you see that they're still not really coming forth, you can go back later on as well and say, you know, I see this is still going on. I wonder if you're okay. Can I help? What can I do? How can I be there for you? And I think it's very important the way in which you say it, to show that you're not judging, you're not saying there's something wrong with you. You're just saying, I can see you're not yourself. How can I help?
Megan, for you, how do you speak to people about the first questions, or how you get about getting this person to speak?
Well, when they phone and say that they would be coming to my support group, most of the time the first thing that they would say, would it be okay if I don't say anything this coming Thursday? And I said, it's absolutely fine. I'm not going to put you on a chair. and make you speak, it's absolutely fine. But when they arrive there and at 9 o'clock when they leave, everybody had their say, because I always make sure, because I know how I would feel if I go to a support group and I have to leave there after 2 hours and I didn't get to say what I needed to say, because you have all that stuff bottled up inside you, and if I'm going to have to wait another week and now I have more stuff bottled up, but I don't ever force anyone to say anything. So I have people that's still coming to the group from the first time I started. So when I get there, I make sure that they know new people, so I will start off with them and make sure that they tell their story. So I will then make sure that they know that they are quite happy.
That it's okay for them to speak in that environment.
Absolutely.
Deborah, I want to ask you though, because sometimes, like you were saying, the person might not be ready at that time. I mean, I'm thinking of Megan's divorce, which is something that so many people go through, whether it's a woman or a man, that the pain is there. So sometimes they might not want to speak about it. I know, a friend of my mom's had gone through a divorce, and there were times when he was just like, I don't want to speak to anybody right now. All I want to do is be by myself, and whatever it is, he just did not want to speak at that time. What do you do in situations like that?
So I think there are different things, but one is you respect the person's need for space, but at the same time, if you understand the way depression works, is that a lot of the time when someone wants to be alone, that's the very thing they shouldn't be doing, because that's a symptom of depression, wanting to be by yourself, becoming irritable around others, not wanting to be around other people. And you kind of want to draw that person out a little bit from that state of isolation. So it's finding a good way to do that without kind of imposing yourself and your what you think is right on them. So you can even maybe visit your friend and just say, I'll just sit around, you don't have to worry about me, I'll just hang around with you, just keeping them company. If it's someone that you're very close to, I think it also depends on the type of relationship you have with the person, that you need to be mindful of that as well. And if there's someone that's perhaps a bit closer to them, then maybe they're the ones who it would be more appropriate for them to do that than yourself.
Deborah, I want to ask you though, because sometimes I've noticed, and I'm not a psychologist, so I don't have the expertise either, but then sometimes I've noticed that with somebody who is in a very deep depression, that in that need for solitude or them wanting to be alone, that sometimes they can be quite hurtful in the things that they say to keep you away from them because they want to be alone. So how does the person that's around someone where you're trying to help and they're being hurtful or saying hurtful things towards you, how do you handle that?
Yeah, you're quite right that sometimes people say very hurtful things that they perhaps don't really mean, but in that state of having that irritability and that anger and maybe trying to push you away, that they might say those kinds of things. I think it's important to have a balance between being supportive but also knowing that it's not okay if they're saying very hurtful things to you, you maybe put it in context, that they're saying this out of anger, and maybe it's something that you can say, what you said is quite hurtful, but I know that you're saying it because you're going through this right now. But I think it's important for you as the friend or loved one to also have that in mind and know that the person is not saying it because they're trying to be mean, but it's as a result of what they're going through. But also know that it's not necessarily okay for them to say hurtful things to you.
Megan, I think that for every single person on this planet, you need support. Whether you are doing really great or you're not doing great, we all need to have a support system. We all need to have somebody who's got our back, or even if just to share good news. You know, you want to call your friend and say, this fantastic thing happened. I think that's even more so when you are depressed, that you do need to have a support system. So I'm coming back to your story, not to zone in on you or put you on the spotlight, but just to use it as an example where you were saying there was so much happening. Because I'm thinking, well, you've got a husband who's helping you, and now you're in a situation where you're a single mom and having to do a lot of things on your own. Your child's having all these problems. So it just sounds to me that one of the things that might have helped in that time was for you to have a really strong support system. So speak about how a person who might be going through something, yes, it's terrible that the divorce has happened, but getting that support that you need to be able to make it easier, that transition easier.
Yeah, I had friends, because my family is all in Cape Town, so it was just me at home with my kids. But I did have a very strong support system all around me. I mean, I had psychologists I could phone, I had friends that I could phone. If I needed a lift somewhere, I could always pick up the phone and phone if I needed to talk to someone. But what I also did was writing, because that helps a lot to put things down on paper. That helps a lot. And like I said, my friends, they were always there. I could always speak to someone. That helped a lot. And then also the teachers, they were incredible. Ashley's teachers, absolute fantastic people. And then my daughter's, she's doing well. She was still in primary school. Her teachers, they absolutely fantastic. So at least there I had a very strong support system.
Megan, I mean, if I listen to what you were saying about where you were when the divorce happened to now, and you're saying both your children doing really well at school, it just sounds to me like a hopeful story. And I think for people that might be depressed, it's that hopelessness of does it get better? And from what I'm hearing from you is it does get better.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also depends on yourself. You know, you can, you're depressed and you can get better. It's up to you. You have to take that stand and say you can get better, and you go and seek help. Go to your doctor, or you seek help at a psychologist or a psychiatrist, get medication and go from there. I believe if you see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and go to a support group, or get a support structure at least in place, or go to a clinic or a hospital at least, and try. You have to do something. You can't just sit and feel sorry for yourself, because you can do either. You see, otherwise give up hope, and then what's going to happen to you?
We're going to continue with this conversation, ladies. Well, when we come back, we're talking about the ways in which our relationships are affected by a loved one with a mental illness. And today we're talking particularly about depression and how can one's ill mental health impact a great functioning relationship. That's coming up next. Well, mental illness, and today we're talking particularly about depression, is often debilitating, not only for the sufferer, but for his or her loved ones too. We've spoken about the importance of correct communication, but let's talk about the effect of one's mental illness and how that can impact friends and family members. Thank you so much again, ladies, for staying with us. Tebogo, I want to start with you, because when in the previous segment, Megan was just talking about you can't just sit there feeling sorry for yourself. you know. And I remember this story that I'd seen on TV the one time about this girl, and she was absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful young woman. And then she was involved in a car accident, and she was burned, but so badly burned that her face had just been completely not what it used to be. And after a while, her cousin, she says her cousin sat her down and said, I will 5 minutes a day that you're allowed to cry from now on. You cannot cry the whole day, 5 minutes a day. And I was listening to this and thinking, I don't think I would be able to say that to someone. And this young woman was saying her cousin doing that for her is what changed it around. Was she would say to herself, I've got 5 minutes. And she said it got less and less, where she found that she was grateful for so many other things, you know, because she wasn't allowed to sit down and feel sorry for herself all day anymore. To speak about what Megan was chatting about, of putting that support system in place, because I would say, if you don't know, one of the first things I would do is I would phone SADC and just say, I don't know what to do. I have no clue. And just speak to us about what the next step then would be, Teboho.
Yes, I think having a support system is really so important. I think I can't emphasize that enough. It's really important because you then have someone, or you have people that you know you can talk to, you have people who understand what you're going through, and who can, when they notice that you're not having such a good day, can help you out. Because with depression, feeling alone is so common. You feel alone in your experience. You can be around people and feel alone, you know. So having support, it really can't be emphasized enough. So if you don't know what to do, so for example, if you're living away from your family, you don't have many close friends around, and you don't know what to do, but you know you need that support. Finding a support group, for example, like Megan's, could be a first step, because you're reaching out and you're going to have a space where you can share with people to just lighten the load a little bit for yourself.
How, I mean, realistically speaking, considering, and I think this is one of the things we think about, of can I phone my friend to pick my kid up from school, for instance, where you think, okay, maybe I might be imposing on someone because they've got their lives. But in this time, how realistic would it be to involve people and say, this is what I'm going through, I'm not coping on my own, can you, and sometimes I would imagine be specific and say, can you help me do this? Is that something, how do people do that? Again, I'm talking about it because you might be thinking, I might not be able to ask my friends for help, but how can people do that?
Yes, sometimes people think, maybe I don't want to impose, or, and I think you're right in saying, be specific about how people can help you. So either, like you're saying, would you be able to pick my son up from school at such and such a time? And the person might say, I won't be able to do that, but I can do this for you. So I think just opening up the dialogue is so important, and that taking that first step from thinking, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to impose, to just saying, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe they can't do it, and that's okay. But I think it really is important to just reach out, and because people might want to help, but they don't know how to help. So I think being specific and saying, help me with this, yeah.
Megan, I wanted to ask you about impact on friends and family. I mean, for me and for you, our children were first, first in the line of fire, But speak about that, about the people that are around you, because I think sometimes when you are going through that, it really is about how you're feeling, and I'm not coping, and I'm not managing, and I feel like crying all day, and me. But am I wrong in saying that? It does feel like that sometimes. So what is going on with everybody that has to live with you, everybody that has to work with you, everybody that's doing life with you while you're not managing to cope, and how it impacts those relationships?
Well, like I said, my family is all in Cape Town, and I'm alone at home with my kids in the afternoons, evenings. So I just try to keep it together and not to cry in front of them. And make sure that I take my medication so that I don't fall apart at home. And at work, I did exactly the same. I know once or twice, maybe even thrice, I cried at work, but made sure that nobody see me. So I think I managed to get through it without them even knowing what was going on. So I worked extremely hard to make sure that no one at the office knew what was really going on.
And why did you do that?
That was probably not the right way of handling it, but I thought that's the right way of handling it, and I just did everything in my power to keep it that way. And I think that's probably who I am. And
what were your fears? Were you I'm throwing this out there. Were you perhaps thinking, well, if they see me, especially at work, if they see me fall apart at work, then they might think I'm not coping with my work, and then that might ruin relationships or put my job at jeopardy. What was going on in your head?
That would be probably the worst thing, because it will put my job in jeopardy, because that was just, maybe they'll fire me, or to just make matters worse for me. And I needed a job because I have 2 kids and I need to just be able to cope. So take my medication so that I can be okay during the day, and keep it together at home as well, because the kids are not going to understand what's going on. So I just made sure, just bite my teeth right through the day.
Teboho, like Megan's describing this, and it sounds like an absolute nightmare to me, because on top of dealing with her own emotions, it's this other stress of everybody else around me cannot know what's going on.
Yeah, and that's quite a burden, isn't it, to be feeling all of this and really trying to contain it, because that's what it is. You're trying to contain. I don't want anyone to see. I don't want people to think that I'm not doing well. I don't want people to think I'm not coping. But also we're different. Like Megan said, that maybe some people are more private, and for a more kind of private person, it's even more difficult to think that other people can see a very personal feelings or turmoil on the outside. It can be a very difficult kind of thing. But another thing is that often people don't realize that other people around them can actually see that there's something not okay. You know, you think, okay, I'm keeping it together, but people can see a change in you. And I think what might be an important thing for employers or managers to do is find a way of, in a very kind of nice and supportive way of saying, I can see that you're not doing well, if there's anything that I can help you with, you know, because I think it also relieves a little bit of the burden. It's not to do it in a confrontational way, but to say, I can see that you're not yourself.
For me, though, from what Megan is saying, and I can understand exactly what she's saying, I don't think the fear wasn't even, if you're in that situation, it's not even wanting the other person to ask if you're okay. I think her major fear at work was, will I keep my job? Is just having this environment of where it's not you almost have to be like superhuman, where you don't have these downs, where if you go through a divorce, we want to see you on Monday, we want you to be okay, you know? And I think that's, for me, that's the problem that I'm hearing from what she was going through.
Yes, what I mean is that in a situation like that, as someone who's in a position of maybe Megan's reporting to that person, for example, is what you're doing then is that you're normalizing it. You're saying, you know, it's okay. It's not to say that, you know, it's just saying that it's okay. I can see that you're going through a tough time. And I think, I don't know how it feels. It might be different from person to person, but it just relieves some of that pressure of having to kind of pretend there's nothing happening. And I think knowing that there's a little bit of support also in the workplace is a helpful thing.
And just say to us, like, what you mentioned it a little bit, but just get into it a bit more in depth, where a person might not be, and I suppose especially when it's the boss, you know, you've got so many other demands on you. The last thing you need is somebody who's going to not break down and you've got to chat to them. But what kind of environment can they create, or what can they say very specifically to make this person feel like, you know what, it's okay that this is going on, and I'm not saying that the work has got to suffer, but you not being okay is okay.
Yes, I think it's just about maybe pointing out that you have noticed that there's something going on, because sometimes with some people it might affect your work, or it might, but it's just saying, I'm aware that there might be something going on. I don't want to pry in your personal issues, but I do see that there's a bit of a change in you. Is there something that we can do at work to support you? Are you getting any kind of help for what you're going through? I think that's, you know, without really prying too much, but just saying that you're aware that there's something going on, and how can we put support in place for you.
Megan, we've run out of time for this segment, but I just want you to quickly say to me, if your boss had said that to you, or the people around you that were your superiors had said to you, we see the change, how can we help you? How would that have changed your work situation?
I would have been very surprised. But I think I would have probably welcomed that. And if they could have supported me, then I would have been quite glad, because there's always a stigma and mental illness. And with SADAG, I obviously fight very hard for that, especially for people in the workplace today, because I can see how hard we have to work to get rid of that stigma. Because a lot of the people that comes to the support groups, I can see how it affects them.
We'll speak about stigma when we come back in a moment, and especially you've brought up something really crucial about in the workplace. Well, if a loved one's mental health took its toll on your relationship, perhaps it's helpful to remember that neither you nor the person affected by the mental illness are responsible for the condition. Forgive yourself and others for mistakes that they make. Well, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Well, we're talking about mental illness, and today we're focusing particularly on depression and how it impacts relationships. Thank you so much, ladies. Again, this is quite a conversation that we're having today. I wanted to speak a little bit about the stigma, Teboho, where Megan was speaking before of there is still a stigma about depression. And you would think that in the day and age that we live now, it wouldn't be such a big deal, but obviously it is.
It is, yeah, it really is, that people are afraid to come and get help because of the stigma, and also some people don't really understand enough about mental illness, about depression, about anxiety, that there is still that stigma that there's something wrong with you if you have any of these things. And I think that's something that we have to actively really try and fight and I think a lot of it is just information and education and experience that can really help the stigma, because there is still stigma. The stigma can be across the board, but also gender differences in the stigma. I can't be depressed if I'm a male, for example. What does that mean? You know, so there is still quite a bit of stigma.
And what'd you say, I'm keeping it with you, Teboho, but what'd you say about for men, for instance? I would think it's much harder because the expectations of you've got to keep it together, you're a man. Yeah. I think it's much worse for them.
Yes, yes, that in my experience anyway, that in my practice, I find that a lot of the time when some of my male clients come to see me, it's at a point where it's already they're feeling like they really cannot cope. So you find that they've battled with depression for a while, a really long time, and it's only now at this stage when they're seeing that it's interfering really with their day-to-day living, whether it's socially, at work, or at home. They see that they're really struggling, and that's the point at which they come, because it's really difficult if you think about socially, the social norms of men don't cry, you know, things like that really make it difficult for someone to come forward. Yeah.
I want to ask you, Megan, do you get men that come into your support group?
I do have men that come to the support group. They come regularly. And I've been chatting to Teboho, and I said, now recently I actually had quite a few younger men between the ages of 25 to 35 that has been calling and coming to the support group, which I'm actually thankful for, because in the beginning when I started the group, I've been moaning and moaning and said there's no men coming to the group, and now all of a sudden I have men coming to the group, and so I have a whole group of ladies and younger men coming to the group, so it plays out quite well in the support group.
And do you find that the men also open up? Because that's one of the things I was asking one of the male psychologists we had in the program. I said, you know, men just, to me, my experience that men don't talk. They'll be going through something and they will not even with their friends. We're on the phone with our girlfriends all day saying, this has happened now, this has happened. And men don't do that as much.
They talk. Because we will, I will just say to them, I would just like to check in with the normal members that come to the group every Thursday. I just want to know how they're doing since last week. And when they're done, and I would just ask them how they are doing and what brought them to the group. And they would just open up, because they can see that these guys have been coming to my group for more than a year, and they know that everything is would stay in that room. Nothing gets spoken out of that room. Everything stays there. Everything is confidential. And like I said previously, that we don't judge them. Everything stays there. Everything. No one talks about it again.
I wanted to ask you, Teboho, is that I hear this with really young people saying there, especially in their teens, you know, where their friend is going through something, and I don't know if it's because of their age and the capacity to deal with dealing with their own issues, and then I hear it from them that there's almost like this desperation they have of like, my friend's going through this, and there's such a burden on them, because a lot of the time it's not something they can solve. So let's speak a little bit about that, young people and their relationships when they see that their friend is going through this and how they can handle it.
I think it's a tremendous burden on a young person, on a teenager, for example, when they see that their friend is going through something. They really want to help, but it can be overwhelming because maybe they don't know where to start, they don't know what to do. They might think, I have to do something, you know. And I think in that kind of context, it's appropriate to support your friend, but also support them in a way that will encourage them to get help, you know, if they haven't got help already. So it's supporting with the aim of getting them to a place where they can either speak to the parents or speak to an adult about getting the appropriate kind of help, because it's not something that you can handle on your own. It's not something that you can handle on your own. You do really need the help of someone older and someone, a professional. But you can still be there for your friend at the same time. But it's about how to be there. You're being there as a friend. You're not trying to solve the problem for them.
What you say is so key of it's not your problem to solve.
Yes.
It's not your responsibility. So just speak to us about it. And this is for young people or anybody where somebody's going through something and that feeling that we get sometimes of I've got to do something. Just tell us of how we can handle that and how we can deal with that sentiment.
I think each context is different, but I think it's just maintaining in your mind, thinking of what is your role as a friend and what else does this person need that might be outside of your expertise, that might be outside of your level of comfort. But not to say you're pushing your friend away, you're still there as a friend, but helping them to get the other kind of appropriate help. But in a case where, for example, you can see that someone's going to harm themselves, something like that, then in that case, you know, it gets a bit trickier because you don't want to leave them alone in a situation where you know that they might harm themselves. In that case, then it's about getting someone involved who can intervene and get them the appropriate help.
Megan, we've just about run out of time, so I'm going to ask you to be very brief, please. But if you could say one thing that you would like for people to know about depression, what would it be?
That there is help out there and that they don't have to suffer in silence and that they don't have to feel sorry for themselves, that they can get help. If they can't afford to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, there is help. They can go to a clinic or they can phone SADAG. There is help out there and they can get better.
Tebogo, what is the one thing you would want for people to take away from our conversation?
I think the main thing is to add on to what Megan said is that depression can affect anyone. You know, if you've got depression, if you think you've got depression, it's something that you don't have to be ashamed of. It can affect anyone. And I think that's just the one thing that I'd like to say. It can affect anyone.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, ladies. And Megan, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. It's not easy to talk about something like that, but thank you so much, Tebogo. Thank you for your expertise, and we wish you the best. Well, it's important to treat anyone with mental illness with respect, compassion, and empathy. Remind your friend or family member that help is available and that you are not alone. Early treatment often leads to a positive outcome. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Hannah Vivier. Take care.